how did you get to this moment? Like, what happened in your life that brought you to this?
Wow, man. So much. It's hard to pinpoint the exact thing, but I think for me, um, graduating from an HBCU, coming from Tuskegee University to Seattle, leaving a historically black college and university campus, then coming to a place that at the time had about a 6% black population was like, whoa, where's our space? Where do I go? Where do I find people? Where do I buy grits? Where do where do I get my hair cut? Where do I moved to Medina when I first moved here because I was fortunate enough to have a job with Microsoft and was making a little bit of money. And so that's where everyone told me I needed to be, right? Like, you need to be in Bellevue, right? And so I moved to Bellevue, and there's no black community in Bellevue, right, for me. And so I was looking for space, I was looking for place, I was looking for community, and it didn't exist. And everyone kept saying, well, the Central District is the historically black community here. And so I was always driving across the bridge to the Central District to shop and to eat and just to hang out. And ultimately got tired of it to the point that I bought a house on that side. I was like, well, I'm always crossing 520 Bridge. I might as well be on this side, you know. For me, black colleges, every black college you go to, any historically black college or university has a union, right? And so, and then as I had some of my friends who went to predominantly white institutions, you would visit them, you would say, well, where you guys hang out? And they say, oh, the Black Student Union. And so for me, it was when you're a professional person who a student who transitions into professional life, where do you find community? Where do you cultivate that? And it didn't exist. And so it became a mission of mine at some point in time to create that, right? And so from either owning restaurants or having a bar or, having a barbershop where we, where community congregates, the barbershops were the only thing that existed in Seattle, and I cut my own hair, so I didn't need to go to barbershops, right? So I think the moment for me was just creating place for transplants specifically to be able to foster community.
Okay. Good. Yeah. And so this particular center, how'd you come up with the name, and what are some of its primary things that you're offering?
Yeah, so the name was easy. I mean, it just threw back to college, the Union, right? That's where we all hung out. Like, if I was on the yard, we'd say, hey, where you going? Meet me at 12. All right, I'll meet you at the Union, right? And so the other thing was science, technology, entrepreneurship, arts, and media is the core of what we do in our nonprofit. And so it's the intersection of those things, or the union of those things, that empower our communities. And so all these things kind of came together naturally. I ran a branding agency in the past, and so I always kind of get off on the branding and the marketing of things that are easy to remember, that stick in your head. Here we're running a co-working space as a primary space. So between 9 and 5, it's co-working, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, if you run a business, you need a place to meet or congregate, this is where you do it. From 5 to 9, it's if you're a professional and you're looking for a place to come, hang out, grab a drink, meet with your friends, maybe have conversations with investors or business people, this is where you can come do that. We sell different levels of membership. We also run an educational program that has always run in the evenings. And typically, do we need to hold on to sound or?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm still rolling.
Cool.
Okay.
We run an education program that typically runs in the evenings. And when we started our educational curriculum a couple of years ago, one of the things that we realized was most people in our community work from 9 to 5, right? Not a lot of people have a time to take off, pay $15,000 to go learn a new skill. And so when we created that curriculum, it was important that people can work or do whatever their hustle is during the day, but have a place they can come to in the evenings. And so the evenings is when we run different educational programs. So whether that's learning how to code or learning how to do 3D animation or be a Salesforce administrator, this is where you're going to come do that in the evenings. The third thing is about supporting the creative arts, not just artists, which we do. So having a gallery. I have a lot of friends who are artists, and I used to talk, where do you put your stuff, and learning their struggle of trying to find gallery space, or what we just call white walls, right? Was like, where do you find white walls? And we're like, dude, let me start telling you the stories about me even trying to get my art in places. And so I wanted to have a space where I'm like, well, I'm opening a tech space. You're an artist. I'm not buying art. I'm going to give you a space to do your art. And so it's also important for us to have a place where Pan-African artists can showcase their work. Being downtown here, it's important now we can plug into the Thursday Art Walk, right? We're right next to an art gallery. We already talked to them saying, well, we're going to have stuff from Pan-African artists. We love to partner with you guys on Thursdays and support that First Thursday art walk. So, you know, on first Thursdays of the month, we'll be open like any other place to come in and view the art from local artists and also international artists who are providing art for us. Finally, supporting the creative endeavors. You know, right now, a lot of people are doing podcasts. There are a lot of young guys and gals who want to be musicians, and the whole notion of the like professional recording studio has kind of gone away, right? You don't need to spend $100 an hour anymore to go into a professional studio, but also consumer technology isn't at a level of like really professional stuff. So yeah, you can go in Guitar Center, you can buy a couple mics, but if you don't really have the skill to know how to edit that stuff or, you know, get pops and clicks out of the audio, how do you do that? And so we also wanted to create a place for the new generation of podcasters and media mavens to have a place where they can come create. And so we have another level of membership that's just for creatives, right? Where you buy credits and you have access to a professional recording studio and an audio engineer and a video editor to help you take things out of your mind and actually create them. And so the intersection of all those things is the union, right? And so that's how we got to the name.
All right, and what are some of those membership levels that you were just talking about?
So, you know, the first membership is just our 9 to 5 membership, which is our core membership where you can, you know, pick any place in the space and bring your laptop, hunker down. You know, we have meeting spaces where you can do that. The other membership is what we call our 5 to 9 or our after work membership, right, where you have access after 5 p.m. We have a social membership, which is I don't want to pay for a thing, but you know what? I'll apply via LinkedIn, we look at your profile, we accept you on that, and then you pay reduced rates for events or access to the space. Occasionally we'll be open for just public consumption. You know, my goal is to partner with other programs globally, nationally, like Black Girls Code or things like that may come to the area and we can say, hey, we're open on Sunday for exposure programs. Bring your kids down or bring high school students down, no cost, you know, come get exposed to coding or art or cooking or, you know, whatever. But like have a safe place where you can come engage. You know, it's funny, we look at the recent news around two brothers trying to meet in Starbucks just to have a meeting. And a week before that happened, I had someone questioning me on like, why do you think, you know, Black people need spaces? Like, why can't you just use the spaces that are out here? And that same person, a week later, I sent them that. I'm like, so are you still questioning me about why I'm creating safe spaces for Black people to just meet and like do business? And so the history of our country hasn't been eroded. And as much as we like to think things have gotten better, in some areas they have, and in some areas they've just been obfuscated. And so for me, it's about fostering community and creating things within the community for our community to sustain and be self-propelling.
And on that note then, so how do you feel that this center will help enhance the local Black community?
Oh man, you know, the name of our organization is Pan-African Center for Empowerment. Very specific in our name. We're intentional about our mission. You know, traditionally, communities of African descent have been underserved, and so we're offering a service to that community. You know, I already look at the impact we've had in the last couple of years of just taking people who didn't know how to code, who are now employed as engineers at local companies, right? I mean, so we're impacting people economically, we're impacting people socially, we're impacting people culturally. You know, this, you know, coming up, we'll have Kwanzaa coming soon, right? And I've always participated in various Kwanzaa celebrations around here. And as we, you know, start to look, how do we make Kwanzaa cool? One of the things that we're looking at coming off of Black Panther is a concept called Wakwanzaa. So how do we take every day of Kwanzaa, take excerpts from the Black Panther film, show them here, but then have community conversations on what Kwanzaa actually means. Traditionally, there has been friction in our community between Kwanzaa and Christmas and Kwanzaa and Christianity, where Kwanzaa has nothing to do with religion or, you know, it's a cultural practice that actually originates from West African harvest festivals. And so it was really interesting for me to see people who would normally be anti-Kwanzaa dress up in dashikis to go watch Black Panther. And so it was like, wow, okay, this is an opportunity for us to bring these things together and draw a correlation of you can still be Christian, you can still celebrate Christmas, but obviously there's something in you that wants to connect with your African descent. Let's propel that. Let's push that further, right? And so, you know, for me, I hope this place is a beacon for people to just, you know, it's bigger than me, it's bigger than our organization. It's about the community. And so if the community doesn't embrace what we're doing, you know, but I'm pretty sure they will.
Yeah. Definitely. That sounds really incredible. So if you're a black person and you're seeing this and you want to be involved, maybe you don't know as much or anything.
Yeah.
Why should they not feel intimidated to come into a place like this?
It's for you. You know, the reason we created this place was the intimidation we felt going into other spaces, going into, you know, other co-working spaces that were established. You know, it's no secret that when black men and women walk into places, we face microaggressions, we face biases. You know, you get in the elevator, people are grabbing their purses. You know, I've walked into co-working spaces where I've paid to be a member for a day and watch people like grab their laptops, where normally it's like, would you have picked up your laptop last week if I wasn't sitting in the chair next to you when you just walked to get coffee? Or do you think I'm gonna like run out of the place with your laptop, right? And so in a day and age where we're living with so much cultural appropriation and what I call cultural vulturism, especially in Seattle, you should feel comfortable walking in a space that's been curated and created for you. Where there's so many times where I walk into coffee shops as the only black man in the coffee shop, because I work from home, I can work from anywhere, I'm remote, and I'll hear nigger-laced trap music over the loudspeakers, and I'll turn around and I'm the only person of African descent in there, but every person in there is like bobbing their head and working and they think it's cool. But if that same artist walked down the street towards them, they'd cross the street. And so, you know, I feel worse in those environments than I would if someone said, hey, we've created a spot that's curated to your culture, curated, you know, for your liking. And it's no different than like other co-working spaces when you look at places like the Riveter, which is getting a lot of notoriety because, you know, it's been formulated for women, right? It doesn't mean if I showed up to get a membership, they're gonna say, no, you're not a woman, you can't come here. I'm sure they would honor it, but they're not gonna change anything about their business to make me more comfortable in the environment, and nor would I expect them to, right? So.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Juneteenth. You guys were scheduled to open this, have your grand opening on Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Why was that initially important for you to open this center?
We're still opening. Our grand opening is Juneteenth. It's tomorrow, and it's a symbolic day in the African American community. The whole notion of, you know, emancipation and the freeing of slaves is one thing, and so, you know, Juneteenth 1865 is when basically Union troops rode into Texas and told slaves in Texas that, hey, there had been this Emancipation Proclamation 2 years ago. You guys didn't know you were free. Let us tell you now, you're free. You know, that's the physical slavery that we've come from in this country, and it didn't end even in 1865. I mean, there's, you know, historical proof that slavery was still alive and well into the 1960s in areas in the South. But what it symbolizes is liberation for us. And so for me, that date symbolizes, and it's going to be repurposed for us for self-sufficiency, a mental liberation, an empowerment of self, not looking for others to free you, but looking for you to free and empower yourself. And that's what we're creating here. If you want to learn something, come learn it. If you want to grow, come grow. If you want to expand, you come do that here. And no better day for me to think of like when to go do that than Juneteenth, as to also keep our history alive, to also talk about the significance of that day and keep repurposing that day so our younger generations don't forget what it means, why it meant it, but also to give them the history on emancipation and that we still are dealing with slavery in America. If you look at the school to prison pipeline, if you look at these other things, and so we're trying to combat that. You know, we partner with organizations that teach coding in jails. So, you know, slavery has kind of changed its meaning in America, but it hasn't been wiped away totally. And so for me, it's keeping that historical knowledge alive while we focus on the future.
And so why do you think, or maybe it's by their choice or not, that more people don't either acknowledge or really understand what Juneteenth is?
Well, I think in America, we have this whole notion of Black history and American history, and they try to separate the two. But Black history is American history. Like, we built this country. And so there's no aspect of American history that you can cover that doesn't deal with Black people. But I mean, if you've looked at a history book recently, right, you'll learn nothing if you're left to the education system about your past and your history. So most Black people don't know, because how would you know if no one's taught you, right? If you've only gone to public schools, I was fortunate enough to have parents who, taught me about my history, right? And so one of the things that, the new terms that you hear the young people are saying, like, I'm woke, right? And I always laugh at that term because I've never been asleep, right? And so I don't have anything to wake up from, right? Like there's never been a time in my life where, you know, white supremacy was a thing or black inferiority was a thing. Like that's non-existent in my mentality. I seek education, I seek knowledge, I go to find, you know, these truths and these tidbits. But if you know, if you just put your kids in a public school education system and expect them to learn anything. I mean, if you even look at the history books in the South, right, they talk about slavery as if it was like this voluntary thing, like people signed up for it. Like, you know, Kanye must have went to school in the South. Like he read some of those books. Like, you know, there was this cruise ship coming out of Africa where it's like, you know, come work a couple years, like it was indentured servitude, like we came out of Ireland or something. You get to work a few years and then you get to leave, right? And so that's why people don't know. I mean, it's intentional, right? As a country, we haven't dealt with our history. We still haven't apologized for our history. You can look at countries like Germany who face, you know, the Holocaust head on, right? They talk about it in schools. They educate people because for them, the goal is to never repeat that. I can't say that's the same goal in America. You could look at our current administration and say, maybe the goal is to bring back slavery, right? And so, you know, if you can wipe away people's history, then it's a better chance that they can repeat it, or you don't have to atone or be accountable for it.
Right. That's a good answer. Okay, so getting back to the tech site, and when the article that I found out about you in, when you had mentioned you were telling the story about how you were at a conference and you could not find another black person there.
That's every conference I go to. It wasn't even specifically that conference. Yeah, it read as if it was like the AWS conference, like Amazon has a problem that no one else has. No, like every single tech. I've been in tech for 20 years. Every place I go, it's usually I'm the only black person in the room, or if I do see another black person in the room, it's like they're so far away, and we don't ever get a chance to culturally engage. And there's this like trauma that I always call the like post-traumatic slave disorder, where for some reason you get some black people in rooms together and they don't want to talk to each other for the fear that white people may see them talking. And I just got sick of it. You know, I got to a place where I'm just like, and I saw in the same conference, I saw a Japanese man walking around with a Japanese flag. And I took a picture of it and I sent it to my friend, and it was 50 Japanese people following one man. And I went up to him and I asked him, I said, what is this? And he says, well, we organize tours for people of, you know, Japanese descent in Japan and out who may need translators, who don't understand some things, but they want to come to these conferences, and we organize dinners and tours. And I'm like, every other community doesn't have a shame around organization and aggregating except for our community. And there's and that was something that I think is left over from slavery, right? It's this trauma that's handed down generation to generation that we still have a shame around coming together. And I was just like, I'm done. Like, first of all, I'm far along enough in my career that like I make my money. I know what I know. I'm one of the best people in my field to do what I do. If you don't want me, don't hire me. I'll be okay. But I can no longer watch my people walk around in a traumatic state and not engage. And so I was just sitting at this conference, listened to a session. On my phone, I pulled up like an Adobe Illustrator thing and just made a business card that was like Black Tech Union, you know, and created the website, like a little holding site right there. I'm an engineer, right? So I was in an hour session. Like I had a landing page up, I had a card printed, I sent it to the Staples on the Strip, rode over to the Staples, picked up the cards, and literally every black person I saw was just handing these cards, and they were like, what is this? And I'm like, I'm just trying to get black people at the conference together today who are professional engineers to talk. And like 90-something% of the people were like, thank you. I don't know why I've never done it, but like, thank you for doing this. You let me know what time. And I'm like, well, I just created a Twitter, so I don't know where we're gonna be, but like, I'll tweet out what bar and restaurant we're gonna be at. And that picture in that in GeekWire was literally that first night of a bunch of us getting together, and like 20 people got together. And it was amazing on two fronts. The amount of people who were just like, wow, I usually sit in my hotel room in the evening and do nothing because I don't have anyone to go anyplace with. And actually the microaggressions I face from people on my own team, they go to dinners, they do things, and they don't even invite me. And it was funny, the restaurant we chose, one of the gentlemen we were having drinks with, his team walked in and he said, wow. And I said, what's up? And he said, wow, there's my entire team. And I don't have an email or a text message from anyone saying that they were coming here. And so either they decided that I didn't want to come, or they assumed that I didn't want to come. And I was like, well, do you want to go over there? He was like, no, like, I'm here. Like, thank you for doing this, right? And so it showed me that, like, we were on the right track. Then I just started moving around, man, and, like, going to other states and just, like, fortunate enough, I go to a lot of tech conferences. So it's easy for me to, like, kill two birds with one stone. Like, I'm already here professionally. Let me keep connecting the dots. And then I started tapping, you know, other people I knew and saying, hey, would you open a chapter in DC? Would you spearhead something in New Orleans? Would you? And everyone's like, yeah, bro, like, you already have the formula. You did the hard work. You just need me to, like, organize people and get meetings. And so that was the start of the Black Tech Union, which is, you know, what I would consider the digital space for what we're trying to do here, right? Because how do we connect the dots globally? Been having a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs and technology innovators on the continent, in Africa, in Kenya, in Ghana, in Nigeria, who are like, you know, because for us, it's Pan-African. It's about the diaspora. It's not just about African Americans. It's about, you know, first generation immigrants who are coming in. It's not just about people impacted by the slave trade. We still have people migrating all around the world. But the one thing that we share is that we're of African descent, and we're gonna face the same biases no matter where we go, right? We're gonna face the same friction. You know, I don't care if you want to call yourself African or not, but if you get pulled over by the police, they're gonna treat you the same, right? They're not gonna ask you, oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were from Nigeria. Well, you're not black, right? Like, no, dude, you're gonna get the same exact treatment no matter where you are. You know, if I look at things that, you know, friends of mine who are in France go to. You know, I was lucky enough to do my MBA and do some time in Europe and do some time in Asia. And so I have more of a global view of the struggle of people of African descent. And that's our focus, is how do we aggregate that view. Buddy of mine who works from Airbnb had a great saying. He's like, you know, we dealt with hundreds of years of slavery. We were shipped all around the world. And he says, you know, not only did we survive, we're now thriving. And the beautiful thing he left me with in one of our meetings, he said, the sun never sets on the African empire. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. Like, when you really think about it, if you look at Pan-African as those of us who are globally dispersed around the world, that is literally true. The sun never sets on the African empire. And so, you know, but we have to start to look at our communities as a community. We have to start looking at the economic empowerment that we control. You know, black communities in the US alone spend trillions of dollars a year on goods and services. How do we dip our spoon in our own river? Right? Exactly. So that's the focus.
Okay, very good. And then following up on that, do you believe there is a very large discrepancy with the amount of black people that are in the tech industry, and how do you feel like this center can help get more people into that industry, get more black people into that?
Well, I know there's a discrepancy because I've been working in tech for 20 years. If you could ever convince any one of these companies to actually release their data, you would know there's a discrepancy. But there's a huge discrepancy. And, you know, I've been working in diversity and inclusion in tech specifically for almost 20 years now. And I've watched the narrative change over time. You know, before it was about what I call the visual minority, right? Where you could look at a person and say, we know we don't have you in a room, and that's what diversity and inclusion was focused on. In the last few years, that narrative has become women in tech. And I always say that's synonymous for white women, because I'm very intentional with language and I don't play around, I don't mince words. And so when a CEO tells me, well, we're focused on women in tech, and I go, great. And they say, well, our women in tech number has increased 30% last year, year over year. And I go, great, how many black women? Oh, well, right? Oh, well, 0%. Well, we didn't hire any. So I'm like, so how is that helping my community? This place is specifically to help that number, right? Like, people of color is not a thing to me, right? That's not a term. That's not even real. Like, everyone has a pigment to their skin. Everyone has a color. So that's another synonym for non-white, right? So people of color is white and non-white. I'm very focused on people of African descent, which means how do you help people who identify as some form of origin, right, off the continent of Africa, getting into tech? How do we build more engineers? And so that's why at first we were just focused on engineering. But there's so many non-engineering roles. There's finance, there's product management, there's, you know, operations, there's, you know, janitors, there's marketers, right? Like, why can't people get those jobs either, right? So it's like, okay, I look around the room and I'm like, I don't see a lot of engineers, but I also don't see a lot of black dudes like filling up the vending machines in here, right? I don't see the cleaners. I don't see the like, and so it literally is about relationships in a lot of this. People hire people they know. You know, I always say there's a lot of ugly isms we deal with, right? There's racism, there's ageism, there's sexism, but one of the isms that can actually work in our favor is nepotism. And so the more people you know, the more people that know you, the more people that know you need a thing, the better you can, you know, the tighter you can make that network, the more impact you can have with that network. So, you know, I get calls sometimes where people are like, hey, you know, you ran successful startups, we're doing this thing. Would you be interested in being the CTO or chief product officer of this thing? And I'm like, no, I'm not interested. But, you know, I got a couple buddies that may be interested. And I realized that after I called through 5 friends that I know, and I'm like, well, all of them are already successful. They're doing a thing. They don't want to do it. Man, this opportunity is about to go back into the ether. Mm-hmm. If I knew 25 more black engineers, I could say, well, call him, her, they, right? And so it really is about growing that network and you know, using nepotism as an opportunity to push and propel communities, right? And so tech has a long way to go in diversifying its workforce. A lot of industries have a long way to go of diversifying their workforce, and the biases that come into play are things that, you know, we can't battle head on. I can't battle human behavior, but I can equip people to get steps further past those biases. You know, I always say, you know, my philosophy is 20-20-20. You know, for 20 years, I've had to be 20 times better to be offered 20% less money, right? And so how do I help the people coming behind me not deal with that, right? I mean, it's something I deal with to this day. I go on interviews, and if you're having an hour interview, I'm spending 30 to 45 minutes convincing people that what's on that resume I actually did. And so now when you know that, like, okay, he's actually the real deal, I only got 15 minutes now for you to actually talk to me, right? And so, like, I don't want people coming behind me to, you know, to face that same struggle. Will it be instantly better? No, but hopefully it's different, and it's a smaller hill to climb.